The year is 2420. One day, every Chinese person in the world suddenly thinks, you know what? We're sick of these damn characters. We want an alphabet, like all the cool languages that are easy. The power of their collective decision was instant. Just like that. Every Chinese character in the world is gone. You're a member of BTS, the Chinese Board of Text and Speech, and your boss has just given you a devastating ultimatum. Figure out the best alphabet system for Chinese in less than 5 days, or die. That was so dramatic. You probably won't die, I'm being honest, but I mean, you just pretend you will. So I mean, where would you even start? Like, how would you even begin to tackle this impossible task of translating a complicated language like Chinese into letters? And really, how long could Chinese really survive without its characteristic characters? You see what I did there? That was good, right? So now, the first step to solving any problem, consider your options. From looking at the data that your boss has given you, as well as your top-notch research skills, you've narrowed down your criteria to 3 simple points of what a Chinese alphabet would need. 1, it must preserve cultural identity and uniqueness. We know Chinese people super proud of our cultural and linguistic heritage. Stealing letters from other languages like Korean and Japanese, out of the question. 2, must work with all dialects. The beauty of Chinese characters is their ability to be used with almost any dialect of Chinese, whether it's Mandarin or Cantonese or something else. We need something that all Chinese speakers will be able to use regardless of where they're from. No KC or no 歧视, no discrimination. 3, must be familiar and easy to learn. Nobody wants to learn a whole new language all over again. Zhuyin, occasionally called Bopomofo, is another alphabet system used for Chinese. It was actually the main system in mainland China back in the early 1900s, and the first of mainland China's attempts to alphabetize their complicated writing system. See, before this, people had no idea what a Chinese character sounded like unless someone else told them. This made it really difficult to learn, especially for children and the less educated parts of the population. To overcome this problem, the Commission developed an alphabet system where each sound had an associated symbol. The Chinese named this Zhuyin Fuhao, means phonetic symbols, and they were created to be used alongside Chinese characters as a way to show what each word sounded like, making it easier to read and to learn. Unlike Pinyin, these symbols were Chinese originals, and they were inspired by ancient Chinese writing, and you actually see it in a lot of Chinese words today. Take, for example, Be. It was inspired by this ancient Chinese character, which was the old character for the word Bao or R. You recognize this in the simplified version of that word R. That original Zhuyin symbol was what inspired the simplified form that you'd see in mainland China today. In fact, Zhuyin is actually still the main alphabet system used to teach Chinese today in Taiwan. Now, while researching Zhuyin, you come across something that might be the solution to your problem as well. It's called POG. I probably messed that up. POG, I definitely messed that up. Oh my god. POG, also known as 白话字, was created as a result of Western missionaries working in Southeast Asia in the early 19th century, and it's actually still being used today. Just so I can stop butchering it, I'm just gonna call it POJ or POJ. POJ is a writing system for Hokkien, mainly used in Taiwanese Hokkien, that actually uses Latin characters, the same ones used in English. It was actually back when Chinese literacy rates were low due to the really complex nature of Chinese characters. POJ actually became pretty popular with actually over 100,000 people literate in it during the mid-20th century, and some of the first instances of Taiwanese printed works were actually written in this script, including Taiwan's first newspaper. Oh, that's an option. And POJ isn't alone in using Latin letters for its writing system. You actually find more examples of alphabets in Chinese dialects. Look to the system Fangfasu for writing in Hakka, or Panghuazi for the Fuzhou dialect. I can't say it, okay? I'm the white guy butchering the accent. And this is an example of multiple dialects that use an alphabet system without any characters and actually had various levels of success with it. A new alphabet system that's not actually new, and it was developed based on old Chinese writing, and it has clear, distinct symbols for each sound in Mandarin. There have been multiple instances of alphabetic writing systems in Chinese working out. So what's the problem? Why isn't everyone using it? It goes back, once again, to dialects. Because Chinese dialects are so different from one another. Like, finding one writing system to work for every sound in every dialect is not just difficult, but damn near impossible. You don't expect Spanish to have the same sounds as Italian, although they both use Latin letters, right? The selling point of Chinese characters is, yes, partially the rich history of it, but also its flexibility. The word ren can be pronounced in Mandarin as yuan for people, but also yan in Cantonese. But the beauty of Chinese is that all of these different pronunciations are represented by the exact same character with the exact same meaning. Chinese without characters can exist, but without them, you lose the cultural unity that makes the Chinese language the Chinese language.
Failure.
But look, we don't want to die here, so let's not let this set us back. We move on to another writing system, one that we're super familiar with. Pinyin is the most common phonetic system for Chinese today, being used by hundreds of millions of people today in mainland China. It basically throws out the use of Zhuyin's Chinese-inspired symbols altogether and just uses Latin characters instead. The truth is, Zhuyin wasn't the first attempt to sound out Chinese characters. It was the first official one, sure. But there have been records tracing all the way back to the 1600s of Western and European attempts to sound out the Chinese language. Mostly it didn't spark much of a rise in the Chinese population though, and they were mainly used to help Westerners basically understand the language. But in the 1950s, a government-funded project group containing Chinese linguists were tasked with creating a new alphabet system, just like you, that would both help improve literacy in mainland China as well as connect with the outside world. It was officially adopted in mainland China in 1958 as the official phonetic counterpart to Chinese characters, what we know as Pinyin. This could work, you think to yourself. The majority of Chinese speakers already use Pinyin to type Chinese characters. It would be simple to make it a system for everyone, right? Everyone speaks Mandarin. Why can't we all just use the Pinyin? As you think to yourself, you start to wonder why other languages like Vietnamese and Korean were able to have an alphabet, considering that both of these languages started out with Chinese characters as part of their writing system. I mean, couldn't Chinese just do the same thing in theory? The difference between Chinese and other languages like Vietnamese has to do with its history. Because China has such a large landmass, Chinese dialects were able to evolve mostly independently throughout their rich histories. It wasn't until actually the early 20th century that a standard shared language was made, Standard Chinese. Meanwhile, Vietnam and Korea are both significantly smaller, meaning that their regional dialects kind of evolved together. And so evolving independently meant that Chinese dialects were often completely different from each other. While languages such as Korean and Vietnamese do have a couple of pronunciation changes across dialects, they generally share the same phonetic system. They're mutually intelligible. If you can understand one, you can usually understand the other. It's kind of like taking British English versus American English. At the end of the day, I mean, they're pretty damn similar. On the other hand, Chinese dialects often have completely different sounds and tones. While some might be kind of similar, some might be completely different. And the difference sometimes even extends to grammar and sentence structure. If I take, for example, the word for I'm eating in Cantonese is 我食緊飯. In Mandarin, it's 我在吃飯, right? They're completely different characters entirely. Now, I go over how to make this a lot easier for you as a Cantonese speaker trying to learn Mandarin in this video over here, because actually it is really easy to learn Mandarin if you speak Cantonese. But without kind of knowing the mapping, it is kind of hard. It requires a knowledge of the mappings, which a lot of the people at that time period, and generally most people, don't really know. But now the main thing that stops Chinese from switching to Pinyin is the amount of words in Chinese that have the exact same pronunciation but different meanings, depending on the character. Take, for example, the word 电源, power source. In Pinyin, it's actually spelled the exact same as another word, 电源, clerk. So if you wanted to write 找不到电源 in Pinyin, it would look exactly the same as if you were to write 找不到电源 down to the tone marks. Two sentences that are the same in Pinyin but completely different in meaning. Now you could say that context clues would make it obvious, but that's the problem. In writing, people don't always have that context. Imagine you try to tell your mom that your doctor was giving you anesthetic, and you send a quick Pinyin text to her, 医生给我打麻. After the operation, you see 500 missed calls from her in panic. She read it as 医生给我大麻, thinking that instead of anesthetic, your doctor gave you marijuana. It'd be the end of Chinese civilization. And this isn't something that only happens in Mandarin. Other dialects have it too. Take example in Cantonese, right? Yan Sam, the word for ginseng, has the same pronunciation as Yan Sam, the word for benevolence. Now take that and apply it to numerous other dialects. The more time you spend researching these alphabets, the more stressed you become. How could you possibly choose between them? The flexibility, history, and usefulness of Chinese characters is just too hard to replicate. No, you couldn't possibly just choose one. There'd always be a drawback. And even if you do figure out a way within the next 5 days, it'd take decades, if not centuries, for everyone to catch up. You just have no time. That's when you have an idea. You say a simple prayer to the spirit of Chinese. You wish for the past to be erased, for Chinese people to have never collectively decided to manifest Chinese characters out of existence. You hear a booming voice all around you that says, your wish has been granted. You go to sleep that night confident that Chinese characters will exist once again and happy that they exist. Unfortunately, that means you still have to learn Chinese characters, so watch this video over here. And if you're a Cantonese speaker trying to learn Mandarin, watch this video over here, it might be helpful.